Good work, Dan. You've come down the arête. We made it. So you can see we only had, a couple meters of rope between us. So now we're going to be walking. The terrain is changing here. We'll be walking across a relatively flat glacier. So we want to increase the distance between us. And we would never be walking on the glacier with loops in our hands, right? No coils in the hands walking on the glacier. So for one-to-one like this, basically both guys want to have a little bit of rope extra, either in the backpack or on their coils. So I'm going to give Dan a bunch of rope. I'm going to undo my coils. And basically we're going to want the middle of the rope between us. And if we're one-to-one walking on heavily crevassed, or as we have today, snow-covered glacier, a good rough estimate is to have between 15 and 20 meters between you. So, typically what I'm going to do, I'm going to take off all these coils. Okay. I have a midway mark on the rope here. Okay, so a 40-meter rope is 20. So if I figure he's going to take 10, I've got to do, another 10 or so. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You could always also count out. You figure an arm length, depending on how tall you are, your ape index is about 2 meters. So 2, 4, 6, 8, and make sure you get that 10 to 15. If you're in doubt, you would always go longer, okay? Make sure you keep that distance also as we walk. The rope wants to be relatively taut between us, okay? So, in the same way that you wouldn't want 60 meters of rope between you on anything decently steep or, an arête or anything, you would also not want to be walking across a flat glacier, especially with new snow on it, with, that short rope. You'd want nice and long, big distance between us. Does that make sense? So, Dan, you're going to take your coils, okay? My coils are already done here. I just got to block them off. Now, what we basically have here is Dan will start out, or myself, and we'll walk out until the rope is relatively taut between us, and then the next guy goes, and that's how we'll progress. And even when we have to stop on the open glacier, we'll always keep that distance between us unless we're on a really sure point where we can be absolutely positive that, no one's going to fall in a hole. If we're on the open glacier and we're close together like this, if Dan happens to fall in the hole, there's all the slack built up. Obviously, by the time the slack comes out of the rope, he'll have a lot of momentum, and that will pull me in. Sort of I call it a Wile E. Coyote scenario, where, and then bad accidents have happened that way. People will stop to have lunch or just to talk to each other, whatever. They tend to gather up on the glacier. It's not a good idea unless you're on a really known point, okay? So keep the distance between you. That's really the key, as we're progressing. And that's gonna keep a lot of problems from happening as well. If we keep the distance between us, Dan happens to fall in a crevasse, that's only a meter or two that he can actually fall in, So if there's all this distance between us, or the rope is not, is there a lot of slack in the rope between us, that's more distance that he can fall in, which, increases his chances of hurting himself, twisting an ankle or others. So we really want to, just keep that rope not so taut that it's necessarily pulling on the guy, but, not so loose either, that, again, there's that risk of getting pulled in or taking a good fall in the crevasse, okay?